Good morning. Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio right here on Market Street in Corning. On the program this morning, we're going to have Bath Mayor Mike Sweet. He'll be in just a little bit. There's our contact information. If you have any questions for him, he'll be on in a little bit. Speaking of contact, I received a heavy question right before he went on the air. So this is kind of off the top of my head, and I appreciate it. I appreciate any question that we receive. The question, excuse me, it's that time of year, folks. The question I received was this. Could you please tell us what your definition of freedom is, what it means to you, and if you believe you are free or not? I feel like I'm back in school a little bit there. I think the important thing to know, and again, this is kind of off the top of my head. I scribbled a few notes right before we went on the air. I think that something I want to make clear that freedom is God-given. Government doesn't give us freedom. Should not take away freedoms. We can argue that point. Well, we'll get to that point. It's the pursuit of the important things in life, family and faith. It's our right to, well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It's the guarantee, again, given by God. So this is something that no government gives us. It's the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms. It's the freedoms guaranteed to us in the Constitution. I think to the point of what it means for me, I think we can all say this to an extent, that because we've experienced this freedom in this country, that many of us take it for granted. It's just something that we're used to. But if you really think about it, it means everything. It means your life. It means how you pursue your life, how you live your life. So it is extremely important to me, and that's why we've done it before on the program, and we will continue to always do it. Thank those who are defending our freedom currently or defended our freedom in the past, those in the armed service, and that's why we thank them and show them the respect. Well, really, we can never show them fully the respect that they deserve and the thankfulness that they deserve, but we try to do our best. And do I believe we are free or not? That's an interesting point, because we go back to people taking it for granted. I think you take freedom for granted until you start seeing bits of that freedom chipped away at. Whether it's certain gun legislation being proposed, or whether it's certain right. I equate it to the death by a million paper cuts, right? This little thing's taken away, this little thing's taken away. And next thing you know, you look around and there's a lot less freedom. So I can't fully answer that question. I do believe we're free. I believe this is a great country where we have freedom, but I do believe it's, what did President Reagan say? Freedom is only a generation away. The loss of freedom could happen at any moment. I think there's a lot of people in Washington and Albany that sometimes have that in mind, chipping away at those freedoms. So I don't know if I did a good job with that, but that was off the top of my head with just a few notes scribbled down, because I read it just moments before we went on air. But I appreciate that question. I think it's a great question. I'd love to hear from anyone out there that would like to add to that definition, take away, argue with me about freedom. Do you believe we are a free country? It's a great question. When we come back, because we are a free country, but do you believe that our freedoms are being eroded daily? Maybe I'll ask it that way, because we still are the greatest country in the world. It's just a matter of, again, how much government intrusion, because freedom and liberty is God-given. It's not from any government entity, okay? So maybe I did something there. I hope I didn't do too much of a word salad, as I always say our vice president does. When we come back, I've got a few things that I think kind of ties in with this idea of freedom when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We've been talking for really since the show went on the air about this lack of faith in faith, lack of faith in community and civic organizations. I mentioned just the other day the poll that showed that, 59% of young adults would give up their right to vote as long as they got to keep their TikTok, which that's a whole nother issue, as you see states starting to ban TikTok usage, but which is kind of interesting. Did they vote for those people that did that? Anyway, that's a side note. So you put these things together and goes back to that question about what is freedom, because as President Reagan said, freedom is only a generation away. So you're willing to give up your right to vote, which so many people lost their lives for that right, fought for that right. That's terrifying. I know I bring this up a lot, but that speaks to Reagan, so ahead of his time in so many ways, speaks to that real threat to freedom. And I mentioned this with an article because I think it all ties in. When people start giving up on community, start giving up on their rights and their freedoms, you see articles like this coming from Gallup. U.S. depression rates reach new highs. The percentage of U.S. adults who report having been diagnosed with depression at some point in their lifetime has reached 29%, nearly 10 percentage points higher, than in 2015. The percentage of Americans who currently have or are being treated for depression has also increased to 17.8%. And, there's been the studies done about people that attend church regularly that do not have these issues, much lower issues of depression. But again, if you don't have something to believe in, community, faith, I'm not saying that's the only reason for that. I know COVID had an effect on depression. I know there's a lot of factors with depression. But I think it paints that overall picture that we've discussed on the program of this threat to freedom, threat to community, just not having that connection any longer. And sadly, I think it raises these type of levels, which is heartbreaking. According to the Wall Street Journal, alarming reversal. The rates have now risen. Here we go. The rates have now risen to the highest level in nearly 15 years when it comes to young people, American children's death, driven by homicides, drug overdoses, car accidents, and suicides. The uptick among younger Americans accelerated in 2020. It's the drug addiction. We talked about it with the sheriff yesterday. These things are all interconnected. Depression, drug usage. It's sad. And speaking of drug usage, maybe you saw this. I know I'm jumping around because we've got so much to get to, and we do have our guest, Bath Mayor Mike Sweet, coming up in just a moment. But this is coming from Fox. Speaking of drug usage, and we've talked about these states that have decriminalized nearly everything. Oregon now realizing they made a huge, or as it says here, enormous mistake. Oregon is the only state in the nation where possession of personal use amounts of hard drugs, including heroin, meth, and fentanyl, is decriminalized. So we talk about the addiction here in our local area and in the state, that real serious problem, the mental health problem, the depression problem, but just the overdoses. So now you have a state in Oregon who said, let's decriminalize it all. It passed with 58% of the votes back in 2020. The polling shows that this did not go over as they thought. I'm not sure what they thought would happen, but it's led to crime, obviously overdoses, homelessness. More than 60% of voters surveyed said drug decriminalization has made addiction, homelessness, and crime worse. Again, I guess I don't know how you don't see this coming. Was it a virtue signal kind of thing where it's, no, we care about everybody, never mind the consequences? Because if you really cared, this would not be the avenue to go down. Olson, doesn't not say this person's first name. Olson said, I don't think Oregonians want to restart the drug war. I think we didn't realize that what we were signing up for was a deterioration of civilized norms and the public spaces being ceded to people in late-stage drug addiction and engaged in all sorts of criminal activities to keep the addiction going. tying a lot of things together this morning. We got to take another short break. Stay with us. Plenty left to cover here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Joining us for the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, it's Bath Mayor Mike Sweet. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Good morning, Frank. Nice to be here.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad that you could come in because we have a lot to discuss. I want to start off with the New York State budget, which has been our main topic for way too long now. Tell us what you thought of the budget and how that's going to affect Bath.
Well, I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I think that, first of all, the bail reform is for hardened criminals, so it's not going to do the people in Bath any good. The people that we deal with that are continuously released from jail are those who are just harassing people. And here's what New York has become, Frank. If you have a job, you can be fined. If you don't have a job and you go to court, they won't fine you because you have no means to pay for it. If you have a car, they'll suspend your license.
Right.
If you don't have a car, there's no consequences. So it's a shame what's going on in this state right now. Bail Fail did nothing. We arrested a 5-time convicted felon. He assaulted the assistant DA went in cap court under another rule that Albany sent down with no handcuffs in cap court. That was a policy driven by Albany, and it resulted in an assistant DA being hurt. So there's no changes to bail fail. No. The people of Bath will continuously be harassed because our cops are basically handcuffed themselves. They can't do anything about it. They'll issue tickets, but they go nowhere when these people go to court. And the other thing I think that's interesting in the budget, and people really need to start paying attention in this state, is the assault on fossil fuel.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I just saw today, and it's not directly to our area, but the power grid, they're already predicting major blackouts in the summer already. How are we going to handle this when we have to be all electric?
The power grid absolutely cannot handle this. And I think it's a bigger question. It's a question of what makes the United States so great and our freedoms and our freedom of choice. And tell us we can't have a gas stove and a gas-powered car. It's absolutely nuts. New York is slowly becoming a California where people are fleeing. People that are successful, people who create jobs, companies that create jobs are fleeing these states because they just can't do business here in New York.
You can't afford to live here. And then and you look at California, you mentioned that, and I know I always kind of joke, but it seems like when California enacts something that's just so boneheaded, we say, hey, we should try that.
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Sometimes. it's absolutely. And you know, and this is reality, Frank. Go to San Francisco. If you've been there like I have, 15 years ago, and you go, I had friends there last week. They visited Napa. They wouldn't take their family there. And I'll tell you when things start to change, just like the immigration crisis here in New York, is when they start coming in your backyard. It's all great. People want to do well for them, which I do too. I'm not really up for people that break the law and enter the United States illegally doing much for them other than sending them back and giving them an opportunity to come plead their case. That's how it should be.
Of course.
But when it gets in their backyard, so here's my thought on California. If you want to end the homelessness in California, the homeless need to start camping out in the vineyards because the vineyards are sacred to California. And as soon as they start putting homeless shelters in the vineyards of some of these big Opus One wineries and things like that, they're going to start thinking twice, and they're going to deal with the issue and finally address it once and for all.
Well, it's kind of like I was just mentioning the article about Oregon. They said let's legalize or decriminalize all hard drugs, to kind of virtue signal, right? This is about helping people. And now the voters are having buyer's remorse, let's say, and realizing, well, we've got homelessness, we've got overdoses, we've got crime rates skyrocketing. But Albany does this. They're so good at doing this knee jerking, trying to show California, I think, hey, look, we can do better.
Yeah, you've seen it on the plastic bag ban. You've seen it on the straw ban. We've seen it over here in New York. But really what it does, it takes away our freedoms.
It does.
And it's really sad. New York is ranked one of the #1 states for the least amount of freedom in all the country. And then we're like number 10 or 11 in total taxes. So it's not good. And
that's a recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster. And children, they don't want to live here. And people that retire don't want to stay here.
No. Well, you can't stay. It's not a friendly place to retire. And I know sometimes people say, well, you're so critical of New York and you keep talking about people leaving. They are.
They are.
We can't hide the fact.
No, it's
I
a
mean, we
fact.
can keep our head in the sand, but the fact of the matter is, as these people leave, they're expecting us to put that burden on our shoulders with the taxes. They're
That's
not going
right.
to cut back spending.
No, and this spending bill is just unbelievable. It's
outrageous.
massive. The spending that's going on in Albany,
Yeah.
it's just massive.
And do you see any upside to this budget for the town the town of Bath? Excuse me.
Well, I do think that there's some interesting funding out there now. There's funding for environmental in terms of forestry,
Oh, okay.
and so Bath has a huge park, Mossy Bank Park. So we're going to look at that because we actually have some issues with disease killing some of our hemlocks and
Oh,
other
of
trees
course,
like that. There's money in there for roads, chips. You know,
Yeah.
that's where they always get you.
I
They
know.
throw money in there for roads.
Yeah.
They throw money in there for things that, big unions, quite honestly, across the state, spending, school spending.
Yeah.
If New York State ever has a downturn at the state level, it's going to affect schools around the state like you've never seen
Oh, sure.
before. I mean, in Bath, the budget, 27%, I think that's the number of the total money raised only comes locally.
Yeah.
So the rest of it's coming from Albany. So if that ever changes, but there's a lot of money in there for schools. Now, does that mean that our kids are ahead of other states? No, probably
No,
not.
no.
But there's a lot of money in there for schools. So at this point, that's good, I guess, if you have kids in school like I do.
Right, and they grab the headlines with the quote unquote positives. It's just like Governor Hochul going back to bail reform, does a press conference about how great this reform is. There's no teeth to it. There's nothing there.
Nothing. There's nothing there. So the same people that we arrested, it's been documented in
Oh.
Bath. Last year, I think it was, or the year before, we arrested the same individual between the county sheriff's department and Bath PD, was arrested 4 or 5 times in a 24-hour period.
In 24 hours.
Frank, I don't know how that happens. And then last May, almost a year ago, my daughter thought she had COVID, so we go out to the emergency room on a weekend because it was the only place open. The state police come in there with a person that they had arrested. He's on a stretcher. So there were 3 people from the ambulance corps, 3 state troopers coming in there. Well, what happened, and I love to tell this story because this is a reflection of New
Yeah.
York State right now. He was wanted on multiple warrants, spotted in Savona, chased on foot, crossed the river. They bring in the canine unit who flushes him out, bites him,
Yeah.
so they have to take him to the hospital. He's crying of being bit by a dog, and the state police is like, you shouldn't have fled from us. Now, Frank, he fled the police.
Yeah.
He was wanted on more than 10 warrants for his arrest, and he fled the police. This is the big thing.
Yeah.
He went in front of a judge. He was given a $100 cash bail. I mean, it is absolutely absurd what's going
It's
on in
absurd.
this state. And if people don't get involved,
Well, yeah.
it's only going to get worse.
It's only going to get worse. And they tell us it's not that bad, but you have stories like that. We all have a story that this crime and this lack of public safety has affected all of us.
Listen, here's an open invitation. This
Yeah.
is all on air.
Yeah.
I invite Governor Hochul and anybody from Albany to come spend the weekend in Paltney Park without their security detail
Yeah.
and just downtown Bath.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
That's
not talking
bad.
Manhattan where it's really bad and out of control.
Right.
Or Utica or Syracuse or some parts of Rochester. We saw 300 kids getting in a huge brawl outside the Lilac Festival, and almost closed it down.
horrible.
Come spend the weekend in Paltney Park in Bath without your security detail. And if you have kids, bring them.
Bring them.
Because I know my kids are terrified at night.
Yeah. It's horrible. Can you stay with us through the break?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and we are being joined by Bath Mayor Mike Sweet. Mike, I have a question for you because I saw this in the news recently. I know there was some issues with the assessment. Could you explain that?
Well, what happened in the town of Bath, and I'd like to clarify this, and I was actually on the forefront because the village was never notified that this assessment project was even going on until we started receiving phone calls at the village office about the assessments.
Of course.
And we had nothing to do with it.
Right.
So I wanted to make it very clear we had nothing to do with it. And I would say that given the scope and the number of people that were very upset about the assessments and the reval, I'm not so sure the quality of the project in terms of the accuracy of the numbers, property was just revalued completely to 100% in 2018.
Okay.
So not that long ago.
Right.
And some property went up as much as 300%.
Wow.
And there were a number of properties that went up 100%. And I don't see, it's supposed to be under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
So if
You
COVID
can't
wasn't
use
a
those numbers.
normal circumstance, then I don't know how you use those numbers. So I've really been an advocate for the people who have had significant increases and wanted a process. There was no communication coming from the town. Whatsoever, and I've really fought for those people. I know that the grievance day is May 23rd,
Oh, good.
so if you're still unhappy, just make sure you fill out go online. There's a form. It's 245 or something like that. You can go on Real Property and find the form and show up on the 23rd, and you will be heard that day.
Well, that's good because it's tough. We keep talking about the economy and all these issues in New York State. So when someone gets an increase that much, it's harmful to them. I kind of joke that it's tough to live in New York State whatsoever, but then you keep getting taxes and how can people survive?
Yeah, people don't understand it like I do, so I'm
Yeah.
a little bit more advanced in terms of my understanding of the assessment process.
Sure.
And I do understand that if everything's utopia and everybody goes up almost equally,
Right.
then the tax rate actually goes down. But when you start picking and choosing and that becomes out of balance, then you have an issue.
Yeah.
And the people that didn't go fight for their 100% tax increase will pay more in taxes. In Bath already, the village of Bath, excuse me, already has one of the highest tax rates in the county.
Is that right?
So we're trying to work to bring that down.
Of course.
We've done a great job. I think in the past 3 years, we've increased taxes 1%.
Okay.
We have a lot of money in the budget, a lot of money in reserves. So
That's good.
we're doing well
Healthy.
financially.
Well, that leads to my next question. When you look towards the future, what are some of your priorities and what are some of the biggest issues you see coming down the line?
Well, obviously a priority right now is to make sure people feel safe when they go to downtown Bath. We talked about that off the air. We need to make sure that anybody feels safe coming downtown to support our businesses. I know my kids don't, quite honestly.
Isn't
We
that
have
sad?
the largest mental health facility in the county right in Bath in our business district. So
Yeah.
ideally, we would like the county to move that.
Yeah, sure.
That's not going to happen. They
No.
just purchased the building, so that's not going to happen. But we need to make sure that there are things in place, not just from a village perspective. The county's going to have to give us some assistance. It's, their mental health building. A lot of the DSS people move to the county seat, so they don't have to have transportation,
Sure.
so they have easy access to their benefits and such. So we have a lot of problems that are drawn just from being the county seat. So we want to make sure people feel safe coming downtown, and then I always tell the staff we want to control what we can control. That's our parks, that's our streets, that's everything that we put our fingers on a daily basis. We want to make sure it runs perfectly.
Sure.
We do a great job of communicating. Our entire staff does to our residents. We're very active in that. And then we also have great vision. We're building a new park. We're going to have 2
Great.
state-of-the-art pickleball courts. Not a lot of other communities have that.
No.
And we're doing it all
It's so
in-house.
popular now.
It's very popular
Where
now.
did that,
so-
where did that come from?
Yeah, Florida.
Pickleball. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, at least we're getting something from them instead of them getting everything
Exactly.
from us. Speaking of pickleball and some of the exciting things you have going on, tell us about upcoming summer events.
Well, the biggest project we have is we have been chosen from this organization called Charters of Freedom.
Okay.
And so Bath will become the first community in all of New York State.
Oh, that's
so
great.
there's other communities that have a lot more on us, like
Yeah.
Corning and other places.
Yeah.
But we're going to be the first community that has the Charters of Freedom. And what that is these beautiful encasements. If you've ever been to Washington and you've been in the Capitol building, you've seen like the American flag and some of the things in the Bill of Rights, the actual Bill of Rights that's under all that glass.
Yeah.
These will be outdoor displays with brick.
That's great.
They'll be all lit. In the Constitution will be etched in bronze, the Bill of Rights and the Civil Rights Amendment, and they'll be right there at the end of Liberty Street,
Oh, that's
right in the beginning of our park. It's all being donated. It's a joint effort with the county and the village to install these things. And it's absolutely going to be beautiful. So stay tuned.
Is there going to be a big ceremony?
There will be.
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
they do a good job with putting that together, and it'll be a rather large ceremony when we start construction.
So did they reach out to you?
They reached out to
Oh,
us.
isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, so the story goes, the short version is that the gentleman that actually oversees this for a corporation out of Arizona, it's their way of giving back to the community.
Oh, that's great.
He has ties here somewhere in New York.
Oh, yeah,
and
funny.
so they chose Bath. We have a lot of veterans in our area.
Yes, of
a lot
course.
of people
Yeah.
in the Bath area, Steuben area,
course, with the VA and everything.
served in the military and took care of this country. So, it's
That's
going to
be a
great
wonderful addition. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else planned for the summer coming up?
Well, just a lot of normal road work, sidewalk projects.
So not the fun stuff.
Not the fun stuff. No, nothing
but the
fun.
important stuff.
Right, the important stuff.
But well, Mike, thanks so much for being on the show and giving us so much time this morning.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, hopefully we can
My
have you
pleasure.
on again soon. I'm sure you have a lot going on in Bath. I'd love to talk to you anytime.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome. I had my mic down. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thanks again to Mike Sweet for being our guest, the mayor of Bath. Tongue twisted again this morning. We have so much to cover. I feel like we're running late already, but I appreciate him taking the time. And I'm gonna. I already talked to him as he was leaving. I want to get a representative from that Charters of Freedom on the program because that sounds like a wonderful organization. That's going to be a great new addition for Bath and the residents of Bath. So Charters of Freedom, I'm going to do some research off the air and look that up, and we'll see what we can do to help in our capacity. Okay. Hey, this kind of ties in with what we were talking about. I don't think this is any surprise that New York has become a key political battleground for immigration debate. We haven't done ourselves any favor on this, and that's what the headline, if you see there, as the debate has grown more pitched, Democrats have done themselves few favors. Yeah, well, Mayor Adams, I mean, he's gotten in a fight with Biden. Adams has repeatedly criticized Joe Biden over the White House's failure to get funding to New York City. But then there's the back and forth of the mayor saying that there's no hotel rooms, and then, of course, places like New York Post and elsewhere saying, oh, no, there is. Look, here's a few places. I think it's a lot of scare tactics, too, for the funding because, they say that. But though I do believe we're going to have a major issue with it because I read this morning that Governor Hochul, and this is coming out of Rochester, is considering SUNY campuses for temporary housing. Keep that in mind. So this all ties in together. Now, last year, it says here, going back to the Politico article, Hochul was thought to be a shoo-in in the gubernatorial race. Republican hadn't won here since George Pataki back in 2002. But then Lee Zeldin did a great job, and of course he didn't ultimately end up winning, but he did a great job of riding the crime issue, of highlighting it, not riding it. They always make it sound like it was some political ploy. No, he was just highlighting the crime issue that Hochul and others in Albany tried to hide or tried to keep quiet or really misrepresent and say, no, nothing to see here. Never mind what you're seeing. It's something completely different. Don't believe your lying eyes. But that brought him within 6 points of winning the election, and of course ultimately he was not successful, but 6 points is still amazing in deep blue New York. And the reason I mention that is Governor Hochul has turned this into a campaign issue, and I don't think she wanted to, but they say, well, yet to be seen if illegal immigration will be a major issue. There's no doubt it will be in all of the races, the congressional races coming up next year, the presidential race. It's going to be top of the heap, just like the crime issue will also be in New York. So Governor Hochul, back to that I was just mentioning, she said she put out calls to agencies. She said she had a meeting in the Emergency Operations Center, and they talked with SUNY, a representative from SUNY. Clearly, a SUNY campus lends itself to immediate help, she said, but long-term, we have to have it free by August. So what happens in August? So these are the questions we're asking right now. We're looking at every possible property in the state of New York to help have a relief valve for the city of New York. I don't want to keep saying this, but it goes without saying, I think, at this point. If New York City, with all their resources and all their infrastructure, cannot handle it, How do they believe, especially some of these SUNY schools in smaller areas? Think of SUNY CCC right up on the hill. Do they think these areas have the resources that New York City can't provide? It is going to be a major issue when it comes to campaigning, but just with what we're dealing with as residents. I'll also, since we're on the New York kick, not to keep kicking us all when we're down, if you had to guess, where is the quote-unquote best place to live in New York? Well, it doesn't take... you can say, well, the Finger Lakes are beautiful. I'm saying, by definition, when you talk about medium income, you talk about... it obviously, it's where, follow the money. Albany. You ever notice that? When seats of government always seem to be the quote-unquote best place to live because all the money's going there. The survey places Albany and its surrounding communities as the 17th best place to live in the nation. Okay. The rankings take into account a number of factors, including average salary. There it is. Follow the money. Home prices and culture. But this is what they, almost to defend themselves on why they won. They said, with New York State's Finger Lakes wine region to the west and some stuff in Massachusetts, the region is a springboard for foodies and outdoor enthusiasts alike. Let's see. So we're Finger Lakes area, best case scenario, 3 hours, a little over 3 hours from Albany. So that's a heck of a springboard. I guess they get credit for our area. Also, last issue on New York before we take a break. I know. New York is eyeing April 2nd for the presidential primary date. So mark your calendar. If you recall, during the race between, it was then Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, New York actually became a focal point at that time because it was still very crucial to see who the nomination was. So it'll be interesting if April 2nd will make for an exciting primary season here in New York. The date might let the state participate in a potential regional primary day with Connecticut and Pennsylvania, which would lead to an awarding of a bonus in delegates at the Democrat National Convention. That's super delegates and all that. It's a little odd to me. While the date is not yet formal, it will be made official soon. Primary scheduling is formally set via a bill passed by the state legislature before members adjourn for the summer and the year before a presidential election. Is this wonky enough for you? And this year's adjournment is scheduled for June 8th. So we will know around June 8th, supposedly. But nothing in Albany is done on time is what we're learning. We've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I know I said we were done with New York State issues for a little bit, but I guess I was a little inaccurate with that. I find this, and this is not any type of critique on the Buffalo News at all, but I find this headline odd, and I want to get your take on it. Of course, you can always contact me there. So we talked, this was going on probably a month ago, about the new rule that certain mascots and team names were going to be banned from our schools if they were in reference to Native American culture. But then there was some pushback because Salamanca said, well, what about our team, the Warriors? We don't want to change it because if you know the history of the Warriors, the logo is an accurate representation of a male Seneca that was designed by a Seneca. So now they have to, I guess, defend their use of this logo. Well, according to this report, again from the Buffalo News, who did a great reporting on this, Salamanca schools can keep nickname, use historic logo that honors Native heritage. I just find it weird that, okay, thank you, state. Thank you for allowing us to keep our historic logo of a male Seneca designed by a Seneca. The Seneca Nation of Indians supports the Salamanca City Central School and their use of its Native American name, the Warriors, as its logo of an indigenous man. The New York State Board of Regents last month approved changes in the regulations that were going to go into effect by June of 2025. After a lengthy internal discussion, feedback from Seneca community members, we have provided our support to the district's request to continue using the Warriors nickname and logo. So do you see how they word that to realize how awkward it would sound if they said, okay, we'll allow you to keep that logo and that name. So we provided our support. I don't know. I find this from beginning to end a very weird story coming from the Board of Regents. Anyway, a couple other things to get to before we take another short break. We keep talking about China and their goal to be a world superpower. Drug shortages near an all-time high, leading to rationing. How do I tie these things together? One of the main obstacles, supply chain. Supply chain is a major issue, something we've dealt with in the past as well. I'm not saying it's on purpose or anything like that. It just shows that we need to bring more back here. The supply chain, we need to have less dependence on China and elsewhere and more back here in the United States. All right, when we come back, George Santos and yesterday's vote, we'll talk about that just very, very quickly. And if we have a chance, we'll talk a little bit about the presidential race that's in full effect. That's when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We'll be back after this short commercial break. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you for all the comments that we've been receiving this morning. A lot of back and forth I've been trying to catch up with off the air. A lot of great takes on many of the issues we've talked about this morning. I did want to jump over to this story from yesterday. The House voted to refer George Santos to the ethics panel. So what Democrats did, if you haven't been following the story, and I guess you can look at the article there, but if you haven't been following the story, Democrats put this up for a vote. It was more to kind of pin Republicans down and make them look bad when they didn't vote to fire him, so to speak, to kick him out, to expel him. But that wasn't they didn't do that. It would have been wrong to go in that way because there's still, criminal charges. You have to go due process. But the Democrats knew that, and they knew it would be good politics. I mean, it's a PR politics, so it's not really a surprise. But what they ended up doing instead was, and it was 221 to 204, with Republicans voting in favor and Democrats preferring the immediate vote to expel. So it was to send it to the ethics panel. Now, to expel him would have taken a 2/3 majority. So again, Democrats knew this was never going to go through. A handful of Democrats voted present, and Santos himself voted to put his potential expulsion in the hands of the Ethics Committee. Santos thanked Republican leadership for allowing this procedure. The reality is there is a procedure. You can't be judge, jury, and executioner, Santos said. I have a right, a constitutional right, to defend myself, and I will do that. And I look forward to doing that, and I look forward to seeing the process play out. And if the Ethics Committee finds a reason to remove me, that is the process. This is the appropriate way to do this. I think that this was the right decision for all of us, and I look forward to continuing to defend myself. Again, innocent until proven guilty. That is a right that we all have. Now, our Congressman Nick Langworthy, weighed in on this yesterday, saying, "We are one step closer to ensuring con man George Santos is gone from Congress for good. I commend my colleague, Congressman, and former law enforcement official Anthony D'Esposito for ensuring the House Ethics Committee can bring this to a swift and proper conclusion. It's time for this scam artist to pay the piper." And that's our Congressman, of course, Nick Langworthy. There's been quite a few quotes by Republicans in that manner, and that's why, again, Democrats wanted to go a different way with it so as to force everybody's hand and make certain people look bad. But if you even see there, some Democrats voting present, seeing that the ethics way is the right way to go. Now, after all this went down, and you know what? After all this went down, I'm going to take a break. But AOC and Jamal Bowman confronted Santos. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that when we come back. But let's take our last short break. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Okay, this is the part of the show where I try to rush through everything I haven't had an opportunity to get to yet, but I mentioned AOC and Jamal Bowman were heckling George Santos outside of the Capitol building. And I want you to remember, no matter what you think, because I know Marjorie Taylor Greene got into the fray for a little bit too. I just want you to remember that, well, let me quote them, and then you be the judge of how this sounds from a congressperson. Bowman shouted at Santos, "You've got to resign, bro." And then AOC said, "You got to go, man." It sounds so weird on my ear that when you think these are our representatives. And again, that's on both sides using language like bro and man. "Expel him. Save the party. Your party's hanging on by a thread," said Bowman. And he was yelling at Marjorie Taylor Greene at that point. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, who comes back and says, "No, we got to get rid of Biden to save the country. Impeach Biden. Impeach Biden." So that's when AOC confronts the whole situation and says to Representative Bowman, "She ain't worth it, bro. She ain't worth it, bro." The U.S. House of Representatives. Hey, George Santos, when it rains, it pours. His communications director has resigned, and I only mentioned this. I didn't want to talk about Santos this long, but I only mention this because I have a little bit of background as a communications director. I could only imagine what the communications director for George Santos would be like. I guess you've got to know what you're getting into at that point. It was Nasha Woomer, resigned yesterday. And listen to the quote. "With respect for my colleagues, the people of New York, and most importantly, myself, I'm honored to tender my resignation." And then kind of taking a shot at the now former employee, saying, "Unfortunately, you never took 1 point of professional advice given." I imagine that Santos isn't the best at taking hints or taking suggestions from anyone around him. Boy, that'd be a tough job. But see, a communications director, in not all cases, but is supposed to have the ear of the congressperson and, make suggestions or offer their opinions or say, "Oh, this would be good, this would not be good, this is how I would say it." And it sounds like that may not have been the case in the Santos office. Finally, we're going to run through a lot here. Florida Representative Ana Luna has filed a resolution to expel, I guess this is going to be common, Representative Adam Schiff. Remember him? Formerly the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. That's because he was pushing the Trump-Russia investigation. That's what Representative Ana Luna said. Adam Schiff lied to the American people. He used his position on House Intelligence to push a lie that cost American taxpayers millions of dollars and abused the trust placed in him as chairman. He is a dishonor to the House of Representatives. That was from her press release on Wednesday. Now, a new poll, this coming from the New York Post, showing that Biden is up 7 points over Donald Trump, but that is very important to know is the popular vote. We know it is very close between the two with Trump. What was it? Trump, not very close. I want to say last I knew he was up 7%. But this coming from WPA Intelligence Survey. Heavy hitters, I guess. They found Biden leading Trump 47-40 again in the popular vote. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to Mike Sweet for being our guest. He's the mayor of Bath. On tomorrow's program, unless things have changed in Albany, last I knew, hopefully, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano will be our guest. Have a great day, everyone. I hope you had as much fun this morning as I did. And we'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. right here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. See you tomorrow. Hi, I'm Frank Acom. Thanks for checking out our YouTube page. We'll be uploading each edition of Frankly Speaking 1 week after the original air date. So, let me remind you to watch the live version of Frankly Speaking, weekday mornings starting at 7, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox.